We often hear about big government decisions, a sarkari faisla. But have you ever really stopped to think about how they're made, especially in a country as huge and diverse as India? It's not as simple as one person just signing a piece of paper. Nope, it's a whole saga involving promises, massive protests, and even court battles. Today, we're going to pull back the curtain on this process, using one of the most powerful decisions in modern Indian history to see how it all works.
So let's go back in time. The date is August 13, 1990. On this day, what looked like just another government document, a simple piece of paper, was about to change India forever. This wasn't just some new policy. This single order lit a fire across the country. It sparked heated debates, huge protests, and a legal fight that went all the way to the top. It was a moment that really shook the nation to its core.
So, to really get what happened, we have to start with the document itself, the one at the very heart of this storm. It's called an office memorandum. I know, it sounds kind of boring, right? An office memorandum. But trust me, the power this little document held was absolutely immense.
So what exactly is a government order, or an OM as they call it? Well, think of it like the final official command. It's the moment when a big idea, a policy, stops being just talk and becomes reality. It carries the full weight of the law. It's basically the government's instruction to the entire country saying, okay, everyone, this is happening, let's go.
And this is the one we're talking about. Look at that name, Office Memorandum number 36012/31/90-SCT. Yeah, it's just a long string of letters and numbers, but it represents so much more than a file code. It stands for years of debate and struggle, finally put on paper by the Department of Personnel and Training. So what was the big deal? What did this order actually do? It all came down to one number, 27%. 27%. That's the percentage of all jobs in the central government and its public sector units that were now reserved, set aside, for a group called the Socially and Educationally Backward Classes, or SEBCs for short.
But here's the thing. A decision this massive doesn't just happen overnight. It's not like someone just woke up one day with this idea. Now, this order was really the last page of a story that had been written over a decade. So let's rewind and take a look at the long journey that led to this moment. Okay, so look at this journey. It all kicks off way back in 1980. The Mandal Commission, headed by BP Mandal, hands in its big report, and in it, they recommend this kind of affirmative action. But then, for almost 10 years, that report just sits there, getting debated in Parliament. Nothing really happens, until 1989. The Janata Dal Party, with VP Singh leading the charge, makes a huge election promise. If you vote for us, we will implement the Mandal report. And guess what? They won.
So, the political promise was made. The election was won. But how do you turn a campaign slogan into an actual, official government order? This is where the whole machinery of government kicks in. The institutions. And there's a very specific step-by-step way it all has to happen. Check out this chain of events. It all happened really fast. First, on August 6th, you have the Union Cabinet. That's the top group of ministers giving the official green light. They approve it. Then, literally the very next day, the Prime Minister himself, VP Singh, stands up in Parliament in front of everyone and announces the decision. And then finally, just 6 days after that, the civil servants in the Department of Personnel and Training get to work, draft the final order, and it's signed, sealed, and delivered.
But you see, in a democracy, the story is never over just because the government issues an order. In fact, that's often when the real story begins. This is the moment when the decision, the faisla, actually meets the people, the janta. And the reaction? Wow. It was immediate and it was intense. The whole country was split right down the middle. On one side, you had supporters who saw this as a historic moment for social justice, a way to finally fix centuries of inequality. But on the other side, you had opponents who were terrified. They feared this would destroy the idea of merit, of getting a job based on your skills, and would only make caste divisions deeper. Protests erupted everywhere.
So this brings up a really important question, right? When the government makes a decision that literally tears the country apart, who gets to step in? Is there a referee? Who has the final say?
Well, the answer is the judiciary. The whole fight ended up in the highest court of the land, the Supreme Court of India. So many different people challenged the order, and all those cases were bundled together into one massive landmark case. You might have heard of it. It's famously known as the Mandal case.
So after hearing arguments from all sides, a huge bench of 11 judges gave its verdict. And here's what they said. They said, yes, the government's order is valid, it's constitutional, but, and this is a huge but, they added a critical condition. They said the creamy layer, the wealthier, more privileged people within these backward classes, they must be excluded from these benefits.
So what on earth is this creamy layer? Well, it's a term the Supreme Court came up with. The idea was to make sure that the benefits of reservation actually go to the people who need them the most, not to those who are already doing pretty well for themselves. It was a way to make the policy fairer, more targeted.
And of course, the government had to follow the court's direction. So, in response to that ruling, the Department of Personnel and Training went back to the drawing board. On September 8, 1993, they issued a brand new modified office memorandum. This time it included that creamy layer rule, and that, for the most part, settled the long and bitter dispute.
So as you can see, this one single decision involved, well, everyone. A commission, a political party, the cabinet, the prime minister, parliament, the civil servants, the public, and finally, the courts. It's a lot of players, right? So let's just zoom out for a second and understand this whole system of decision makers.
Okay, so in India's system, you basically have three key players at the very top. You've got the president, who is the head of state. Think of them as the formal ceremonial head. But the real day-to-day power to make big policy decisions, that lies with the prime minister and their cabinet. They're the head of government. And then, of course, you have parliament. That's where all the debating happens, and it's their job to represent the people and keep the government in check.
This table right here, it's the perfect summary of the entire journey we just talked about. Look at how it lays out every single stage. It starts with an expert report from the Mandal Commission that leads to a political promise from a party. Then you have the cabinet's official decision, the PM's big announcement, the actual government order, the public's massive reaction, and finally, the Supreme Court's review. Every single one of these steps was absolutely essential.
Now, I know what you might be thinking. Wow, that process seems so long, so complicated? But here's the thing. That complexity, it's actually a feature of a democracy, not a flaw. Why? Well, for one, it makes it really hard to make rushed, bad decisions. It also means that a whole lot of different people with different views get a chance to be heard. And because everything follows established rules, the decisions that are made are stable. They stick around, even when governments change.
Which kind of leaves us with this final thought to chew on. This whole process, it's slow. It involves so many different voices, from experts to politicians to the public to the courts. So is all this complexity a weakness of democracy, or is this careful, inclusive, sometimes messy process actually its greatest strength? What do you think?